What's up, composers? I'm going to show you everything that you need to know about string harmonics and how to engrave them effectively in Dorico. Now, there are a few things that we need to keep in mind, and I'm going to get into all of the little details and all of the nuances about artificial and natural harmonics. If you're new to this channel, my name is Mathew. I'm a composer and cellist. I got my PhD in music composition at Northwestern University, and I also founded the Sound Painter Studio, which is an online community where composers can come together to level up their music under my guidance as their composition mentor. On my channel, you can find free courses in music composition, music theory, and I'm also doing these tutorials in Dorico, especially for people who learned how to do like non-traditional notation or extended technique inside of Finale and are now having to learn those things in a new software. So if there are specific things that you're trying to do inside of Dorico that you knew how to do in Finale and now you don't really know how to do, let me know what they are in the comments and I'll see if I can include them in a future tutorial. Let's jump right in. When you're notating and engraving string harmonics inside of Dorico, there are a couple of ways that you can do this. For now, I'm going to focus on bowed string instruments, either artificial harmonics and natural harmonics. Before I get into how to actually notate these things and engrave them in Dorico, we need to understand the theory behind string harmonics. So we need to first understand the harmonic series. So the harmonic series is basically just a series of overtones or harmonics that emerge from one single fundamental. Now, what do I mean by that? If we imagine that we have the fundamental of C for the cello, this is the low C string on the cello. This would be the first partial or the fundamental. The second partial is going to be one octave higher than that. The third partial is going to be an octave plus a perfect fifth. And the fourth partial is going to be 2 octaves above. Now what you're going to start to notice is that every time a partial doubles, it's an octave higher. So the first partial doubles to the second partial is an octave higher. When 2 doubles to 4, it's an octave higher. So basically when you have multiples of a particular partial, it's going to be an octave higher than that specific partial. So we can assume that the 8th partial is going to be a C, the 16th partial is going to be a C, the 32nd partial is going to be a C, the 64th partial is going to be a C, and so on. The third partial is then a G, the 6th partial is a G, the 12th partial is a G, the 24th partial is a G, and so on into infinity until those frequencies are no longer loud enough and they just disappear. So this is sort of how it works. The 5th partial, and this is where it starts to get interesting, is going to be 2 octaves plus a small major third, and it's less than 14 cents than its equal tempered counterpart. Then again, the 6th partial is an octave higher than the 3rd partial. The 7th partial is going to be, and this is where my notation starts to become a little bit esoteric and sort of customized. This is where it's going to be 31 cents lower than an equally tempered B flat. Then we have the 8th partial, which is double the 4th partial, the 9th partial, which is a step above that, the 10th partial, which is an octave higher than the 5th partial. And then after that, it starts to become increasingly microtonal. And I'm going to use approximated accidentals here. There are more sophisticated tuning systems and notation systems for specifying the specific sense deviations for these. In the case of the 11th partial, it's going to be 3 octaves and a tritone above the fundamental minus 41 cents. Now again, there are notation systems that will specify specifically 41 cents. This accidental is an approximation, and as you know from equal tempered, like 24 divisions of the octave, this would actually represent 50 cents. I know that this is not a precise representation of this sense deviation. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can find these kinds of notation systems, and I'll leave a link to a resource where you can learn those things in the description. Then we get the 12th partial, which is double the 6th partial, the 13th partial, which is 3 octave plus a minor 6th plus 49 cents. And so on. So this is basically how the overtone series would play out theoretically for a perfect overtone series, where basically the formula would be like the frequency times n, where n equals the partial number. So in this case, the frequency of the C equals 65.4 hertz. If we multiply this by 1, we get the fundamental. If we multiply it by 2, we get the octave. If we multiply it by 3, we get the octave and a fifth, 4, 2 octaves, and so on up through the harmonic series. If we were to think about this in terms of artificial harmonics, if we want to notate this specific partial, what we would need to do is touch a fourth above the string. This is because all of these nodes divide the string into equal parts. And I'm going to put a graphic on the screen so you can see this. So if you touch the 4th node, it divides the string into 4 equal parts. If you wanted to multiply it by 5 to get the 5th partial, you would need to touch a point that divides the string equally into 5 parts. And so one of those spots is a major third above the string. If you wanted to multiply it by 6, you would touch a point on the string that divides it into 6 equal parts. And so you would touch a minor third above the string. This is the closest one that you can do. What's specific to the way that Dorico works for artificial harmonics is it can only go up to the 6th partial. Because once you get to the 7th partial and above, you're going to need to use modified microtonal accidentals to actually produce those sounding results. So if you want to divide the string into 7 equal parts, you're going to need a bunch of different custom accidentals that Dorico just doesn't have built into it. So the way that I do it personally, 2 of them that you could use would be if you touch this point on the string, which is a small minor third, which I indicate with a flat and an arrow attached below it. If you touch that point, you're going to get the 7th partial. Another one would be perfect fourth plus a quarter tone above open string. And I can demonstrate this on the cello. So I'm going to play through the first 7 partials, and I'm going to show you the specific points on the string that you need to touch to produce those pitches. To get the 2nd partial, you just touch an octave because it divides the string equally in half. So it's just the halfway point, and there's only one place on the string that you can actually do that. If you want an octave in a 5th, you need a point that's going to divide the string in 3 equal parts, which is a 5th above the string. And there are 2 points because if you divide something in 3, there are 2 divisions. If you want to divide it in 4 equal parts, you can touch a 4th above the string. If you want to do the 5th partial, you can touch a point that divides it in 5 equal parts. So that's going to be that point that is 2 octaves plus a small major third above the fundamental. And then a minor third, that's going to be your 2 octaves plus a perfect 5th. And then after that, the small minor third is when you start to hear the 7th partial. And this is where it starts to get microtonal. This is a wide whole step. And so the higher you get in the harmonic series, the closer and closer these are going to get because they're dividing the string into more and more equal parts. So how does this actually translate into Dorico? For artificial harmonics, we have up to the 6th partial for any given fundamental, so you would notate it like this. On the cello, for most fundamentals, we're not actually going to be able to reach a 5th above the string. Unless you're really high up on the fingerboard, you're probably not going to get that 2nd partial. So I would only reserve that for intervals that you can actually reach. On the smaller string instruments, these are probably more feasible. So I would just always consult the performer for whatever you're going to actually notate so that you know that it's working and you know that it's possible. In Dorico, here's the way that it works. If you want to hear all of these specific partials, you're going to need to notate them with the conventional circle above the note head and use the same sounding position on the instrument as the harmonic itself. So for example, you could say that this C is a harmonic, or this G is a harmonic, and so on, and then indicate what string it is. I would do this by using a Roman numeral to indicate the string. So 4 is the C string, 3 is the G string, and so on. And then you just notate those notes and the circle above the note head so that the performer knows that it's a harmonic. Now, if you want to have the same accidentals that I'm using here, then you're going to need to use your own custom tonality system to actually play it back correctly. And if you want to know how to do that, I made a video about this. So you can click the link that's going to appear on the screen so that you can watch that tutorial if you haven't. And that way you can create your own custom tonality systems to be able to hear back these microtonal deviations so that the harmonic series is actually justly tuned. One thing that's important to keep in mind is that not every instrument is going to have exactly the same pitch deviations as a true harmonic series. And that's because of timbre and different amplitudes for the different harmonics. And this is just a whole other complex animal that I'm not going to get into this video. So now let's open Dorico and I'm going to show you how you can actually notate each of these various examples. I'm just going to set up a solo cello piece. And as always, you can remove key signatures and time signatures. I'm going to leave it like this for the moment. If you want to actually notate these harmonics, let's start off with natural harmonics. So again, if you want to go into write mode, you press Command 2, and I'm going to click Enter and just start inputting notes. I'm going to use quarter notes because it kind of doesn't matter. So I'm just going to start off with C, which is going to be the octave harmonic if we think of the C string. And then I'll write G, move it up an octave with Command Option or Control Alt, and then the up arrow. And then another C, E, G. So these are the second through the sixth partials. If I wanted to make these harmonics, I would go into the properties window at the bottom and then find harmonics by typing, and I would just do type natural. You can modify the style if you want to have white diamond note heads. For now, let's just walk through how you would do this with the circle above it. Change these to natural harmonics, and they're gonna sound the same as these written notes. So if we wanted to listen to this, these would be the second through the sixth partials. Now, if we wanted to get these same notes but not use the same nodes, N-O-D-E-S, then we need to use a different notation, because this is both descriptive notation, meaning you're telling them what it's going to sound like, and it's prescriptive notation, telling them what they have to do. The only thing that I would add is I would put the Roman numeral 4 to indicate that these are all on the C string. But if you wanted these to be played at different locations on the string, you would need to use an alternative notation. And so I would do it like this. First, I'm going to add the C itself, and I'm going to move this down to the correct octave with Option, Command, and then the down arrow, or Alt, Control, down arrows. And then what you can do for the third partial, as we saw before, is a fifth above the open string, you can play that G. And then the fourth above the open string is going to be a touch fourth. So you need an F. The touch major third is going to get that 2 octaves plus a major third. And then that sixth partial is going to be an E flat. So in this case, what I would do is I would change all of these to harmonics, and I'm going to make them natural harmonics, and I'm going to change the style to white diamond note head. So now this is the correct tablature notation. So in this case, you can actually change the node so that you're going to get the correct sounding result. So let's say that I change this node to the second partial because it's the second node. And then I can change this to the third partial because it's a fifth above the open string, so I want the third partial. This is going to be the fourth node. This is going to be the fifth node. And all node means is it's dividing a string into equal parts. So you want 5 equal parts, 4 equal parts, 3 equal parts, and so on. And then this one is going to be 6. So if we want to play that back, we do Option P. And then when you play it back, it should play the corresponding partials correctly. And so it sounds identical to the opening. And so that would be the way that you would use natural harmonics. The interesting thing is if you try to do other kinds of things, sometimes it doesn't work. So in another project, I was trying to do a particular pattern. So I'm going to show you what I was trying to do. I'm going to go into note input mode and do eighth notes. And I'm going to do F, C, and A. And then I'm going to make all of these triplets. And I'm going to try to do the same thing. Natural harmonics. I'm going to do style, white diamond note head. Node, it's the fourth node. Same thing here. Actually, I'm going to just select all of them, make them harmonics, and make them natural harmonics. Style, white diamond note head. And so for this one, it's also going to be the fourth partial, and this is going to be the third partial. So if I were to copy and paste this, and I'm going to make all of these triplets, do one more. The weird thing is that playback is going to get kind of weird. So you notice that that middle note is not playing the fourth partial like it should. So if I select it, it should be playing back the fourth note, but it's actually not. If you wanted to get that correct playback, you would need to actually write artificial harmonics. The problem is that you can't actually hide the fundamental of those artificial harmonics. And I'm not sure why it doesn't work, because as you noticed earlier, these 5 notes worked as the correct nodes, but then this middle one doesn't. So it's strange that it's inconsistent, because I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to. This is playing back as 2 octaves above, and it's the fourth node, but this one is not. So currently, it seems that there are some inconsistencies in how this is programmed. Because if I wanted to play this, and I'm gonna play a slightly different pattern here. So I'm gonna do just a sort of reverse and copy paste these 2 here, make them triplets, and then slur. So if I wanted to play this passage on the cello, it's actually really easy to do. All you have to do is find those notes, It's a pretty simple pattern, but for whatever reason, the playback doesn't work. So if you want to get the playback to work, you're going to need to use a workaround by notating this as artificial harmonics. Let me show you how you would do that. Make these artificial harmonics, and then the partial is going to be the touch fourth, or the fourth node. Same with this one, artificial harmonics. Partial is the fourth node. And then here, type artificial, partial, third. And so now you see that I have the same nodes that are being stopped on the cello, and I'm going to get the correct playback. So I'm just going to quickly put this into the rest of the measure, and then we're going to listen back. Now I have the notes input for the playback to work, but the notation is incorrect. So on the left in bar 7, we have the correct notation but the wrong playback, and on bar 8, we have the right playback and the wrong notation. Let's just listen to these measures back to back. You can very quickly hear the difference between them. That middle note on the G string is not playing back correctly. So if playback is important to you and you want to preserve that information about the specific node that's going to be touched on the string, I would opt for bar 8 as the notation. And if you don't really care about the playback, you just want to tell the performer where they're supposed to play, then I would use bar 7. I just wouldn't use this natural harmonic notation with the circles above it because it's only descriptive, meaning it tells you what it's going to sound like but not what the player has to do. If they see that notation, they're going to assume they need to play at those specific points on the string, which may not be necessary because, as we know from bars 3 and 4, you could get the same sounding results by playing those specific notes. And for whatever reason, this works, but this doesn't. And I'm not sure why. I've tried a lot of workarounds. One thing that I tried to do was to remove the note head in this case on the lower staff, but what ends up happening is if we try to do that, if we can go into engrave mode and we can actually hide the note head. If I deselect it, you'll notice that that lower note head gets hidden, but we still have ledger lines. So you could then say, well, I want to also hide the ledger lines. The problem then becomes that the stem is too long, and it doesn't seem that there's a way that we can actually modify the stem, unless we hide the stem and add another graphic that would then replace the stem, which would be really complicated and add a bunch of tedious steps if you want to have both playback and the notation. So in some cases, you may not really want that. And again, the harmonics in this case are going to be really limited. You can only do up to the 6th partial. So if you're writing music like I do, which has a bunch of different harmonics that are not just up to the 6th partial, but much greater, then I probably wouldn't even worry too much about playback and would just try to get it engraved and notated as accurately as possible so that your performer knows what they're supposed to do. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can say what the sounding results is going to be, either by notating on an additional staff, or you can just say what partial you're asking for. So if you're asking for the 7th partial, just write that above the note where you're writing the harmonic and then notate what string it's going to be on. In the description below, I'm going to add some resources that help you to understand string harmonics to a much greater degree. And if you have any questions, let me know what they are in the comments. So now I'm going to show you the process for doing artificial harmonics. We kind of already got into it in bar 8, but I'm just going to show you how you would do this to make sure that you're notating them correctly and using the correct methods for actually being able to do this. So if I write some notes, I'm going to go into note input mode by clicking enter and just type 4 A's. So exiting note input with enter, I then can select all 4 of these if I want them all to be harmonics. And I'm going to type in my search bar type artificial, and it automatically changes these to artificial harmonics. Now, this particular artificial harmonic is probably not feasible, so we're going to obviously need to change the partial number to a higher partial. The most common one is the touch fourth, so we can change these all to touch fourth harmonics, which would basically sound like this. And there's the touch fourth. And you notice I went into thumb position. You don't always have to. Some people can reach it by going into an extended position. And then if you want to go up to the higher artificial harmonics, all you would need to do is just select those partials for those specific notes. So if I want to go to the 5th partial or the 6th partial, that's again the limit there, you would be able to modify it by that degree. And you should be able to get the playback to do it as such. So if I do Option P to move my playhead to bar 12, I'm going to press space and I should hear the right notes. So that's basically it. So if I play the cello, I can confirm that those are the right notes. And there you have it. So that's basically everything that you need to know about how to use string harmonics correctly, how to use artificial harmonics and natural harmonics, whether you want just to have the notation correct and you're not worried about playback, or whether you're worried about playback and you're okay with having incorrect notation, and also how you would do artificial harmonics up to the sixth partial. Now, obviously, you can write beyond the sixth partial, but Dorico just can't play it back. And you're also going to have custom tonality systems to be able to use modified accidentals to be able to represent those specific divisions of the string so that your performer knows where to play on the string so that they can actually get the desired note. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. If there are more things about Dorico that you're trying to figure out, let me know what they are in the comments. See you in the next video.